Now, Googlers are amazingly curious people. They travel the world, they roam the world. And there's a colleague amongst us who did an unusual trip around the world and learned that the journey is just half the fun. Here from the Belgium office is Francois de Halleux.
So, have you ever paid attention to children while you're taking the plane? They always want to sit next to the window, don't they? And they do so because they're so curious to see what they're flying over. So 2 years ago, I was supposed to go on holidays in Australia, but I decided to make it a little bit more exciting. So instead of booking just a return ticket, I decided to book only a one-way. I would go back to Brussels with only one rule. I would refuse to board a single airplane. So I went back home by train, by bus, and the drivers were not always very reliable. But I also took the boat, and I went by foot and even by horse. So this is Australia. And the ocean around it, well, that was my first very big problem. Because I found out that no cruise ship is leaving Australia at all. So that left me with the only option of boarding a huge cargo ship all the way to Singapore. And that took me 12 days. So on that ship, I learned my first lesson, is that we as humans, we can adapt to almost any situation. These 12 days on the ship turned out to be very enjoyable and very relaxing. So this is a Matopele, a Mentawai shaman. The Mentawai live very deep in the rainforest on some remote islands off the coast of Indonesia. And they're said to be cannibals. So these are skulls that they really hang in their hats to protect them from the spirits of the forest. But I should mention these are monkey skulls. Luckily, they're not cannibals. But so Amatopele showed me how they built their huts with trees 6 meters deep in the ground to resist earthquakes. And just a few months before I arrived in Indonesia, a really big earthquake hit the country, and the Mentawai Islands were right next to the epicenter of that quake. On the mainland, there were 1,000 victims. Yet none of the traditional huts of the Mentawai was damaged. So Amatopele taught me my second lesson. It's to not judge people before getting to know their culture. Because some traditions that might seem very silly or a bit strange, they often turn out to have a very sophisticated function. So a bit later in Tibet, I had another problem and I was stuck for 6 days because of very heavy snowfall in a very small village. I was the only tourist there, so I soon got to know many of the other villagers. And there was one monastery, and around the monastery, I kept seeing this little beggar girl. She was attached with a rope to her blind father to guide him. All day long, they were walking around that monastery and turning the big praying wheels in the bitter cold. So one day, I decided to invite these two to the small restaurant of the village. And the joy of that little girl eating a good meal and watching the television for the very first time is something that I will remember for a very long time. And she taught me my third lesson, is that you can connect with anyone through a simple little act of kindness. So people often ask me, okay, so what was the hardest part on that trip? And it was to actually take that decision to leave and to book that one-way ticket. So I think that teaches us the great final lesson of this talk, is that if you, I don't know, want to learn Chinese or run a marathon, I advise you to just go ahead and take that very first step. You will see that everything else will follow if you put enough drive into it. I think we can all dream our lives. We can also live our dreams. And that choice is up to us. Thank you.
Very profound words. We can dream our lives or we can live our dreams, and the choice is ours. When I first looked at Francois' photo album, I thought I was looking at a National Geographic collection. And I had to pinch myself to remind myself that this is an APMM colleague of mine, only at Google.